violent storm raging across the Bering Sea had gotten so intense we were forced to stop fishing and enter survival mode. Monstrous seas flung our boat from one wave to the next. The crew was gathered in the galley when the captain asked if I wanted to do some scuba diving. I mistook the question for a lame attempt at humor, of course, I said, playing along with the preposterous proposition. My father got me this job on a crab boat because his trawler sank. I was a 17-year-old trying to do my best in a fishery in which I had no experience. And now I was about to die. I brought my diving gear in case I had an opportunity to pick up a few extra dollars doing odd jobs in the calm, protected waters of Dutch Harbor. No sane person would consider diving in the open ocean during a full-on 50-knot storm. When the totally serious captain said, "Okay, I will tell him," it was apparent I accidentally agreed to something particularly awful. By the time we reached the Endeavor, the wind had diminished to about 40 knots, but seas were still running at around 25 to 30 feet in height. My shipmates inflated a rubber raft and lowered it into the water, with me inside on the windward side of the disabled vessel. Tied to the Pacific Voyager with a long line, the now water-filled raft and I were tossed mercilessly toward the Endeavor. A line from a crab pot fouled the Endeavor's propeller and they floundered helplessly in the violent storm. Another boat took it in tow, but was unable to make headway in the rough water. Twice the tow line parted, and the boat was now adrift in the heavy seas. Without assistance, the Endeavor would soon be driven onto the rocky shore of a island. As the raft approached the stern of the Endeavor, I felt like a fly in a flushing toilet. The stricken boat was heaving wildly up and down as the waves lifted it and rolled away. The tangled line around the prop was exposed when the stern lifted from the water. I thought the only way to safely approach was to dive below the boat, perhaps to a depth of 30 feet, and try to cut the tangle of line from below without being crushed. But could I keep up with the wind-blown boat? Was I diving into certain death? Would the captain find me again, a tiny black speck splashing in a dark storm? With thoughts as tumultuous as the surrounding seas, I rolled from the raft and swam below the surface. Just out of reach of the hull, I appraised the situation. About 50 wraps of 5/8" nylon line were wound tightly around the shaft and propeller. Loops of nylon line and a mess of corkscrewed 3/4" polypropylene line were pulled close behind. When the hull approached, I frantically slashed at the line, trying hard to avoid being knocked out by the 190-ton ship. My initial attempts were entirely ineffective. The boat lurched up before I could make a single cut. At this point, I remembered the sage words of my father: "Don't just stand there, do something, even if it's wrong." When the boat came down again, I wrapped my arms and legs around the propeller shaft and held on. As the boat jerked upward, I almost lost my grip. My face mask was knocked to the side and filled with water, much of which I promptly inhaled. Before I could recover, the hull crashed down on my tank, jamming the valve into my head and knocking the regulator out of my mouth. Surprised to be alive and still conscious, I straddled the shaft and wedged myself between it and the hull above. The position was tenuous at best, but it allowed brief periods of work on the line. Most of my energy was spent just holding on. An audience of 5 or 6 sea lions observed the odd spectacle. They followed me up and down, sometimes approaching within a few feet. Unlike my experience with sea lions out of the water, these exhibited no hostility or fear. They were curious, friendly, and probably amused at the ungainly alien that created so many beautiful bubbles. I worked about an hour before running out of air. Exhausted and shaking from cold and running on reserve air, I kicked away from the boat before the stern rose again. At the surface, I signaled to the deckhands on the Endeavor. They started their engine and engaged the gear. The propeller turned. Back on the Pacific Voyager, I was shaking, weak, and barely able to walk. I showered, dried, and fell exhausted into my bunk. When I awoke, I was surprised to find I had slept for 24 solid hours. I was stiff and sore. Colorful bruises decorated nearly the entirety of my body, but I was alive. The weather was starting to subside, and soon we were fishing again.
clinging to the underside of a boat. During a Bering Sea storm is an interesting vantage point for reflections on life and death. Although at the time I was too focused on not dying to spend any energy pondering the meaning of life. Spending so much time adjacent to death has undoubtedly catalyzed my spiritual quest over the years. I try always to be ready for that wonderful transition, and I look forward to the experience with a degree of trepidation and a lot of hope. Fortunately, I am not a person to freak out at impending doom. I am not sure anybody really knows how they will react to imminent death until they are placed in the situation. My dad built a brand new 110-foot Bering Sea crab boat when I was 18 years old, and I was its first engineer. We left Seattle loaded with supplies and a mountain of crab pots on the back deck. Things went fine on the voyage across the Gulf of Alaska, but a storm was brewing in the Bering Sea, and we met the full force of its fury as we made our way through Unimak Pass, the primary shipping lane for vessels following the Great Circle route to Asia in an area noted for its high seas, including one that took out a lighthouse, killing its 5 keepers. In the pass, we were raised high in the air by a monster wave and then fell off the wave's front, our bow plunging deep into the trough ahead of another monster sea. That sea buried us. My father was driving the boat from the starboard control station, and I was standing in the center of the wheelhouse, buried by the sea. The wheelhouse went dark. We were now a submarine. My father was a master mariner licensed to captain any ship in any waters. He went to sea at age 16 and was captain of a Norwegian whaling gunboat when he was in his early 20s and ran Liberty ships in World War II. He had seen a lot. He looked across the wheelhouse and calmly, but with a voice dripping with sadness, said, "Well, Sonny, it looks like this is it." It was certain death. We were sunk. The boat was buried, the engines died, alarms were blaring, it was black. I was sad. Sure, I suppose I should have been afraid, but I felt oddly peaceful and accepting of the inevitable. Mostly I was sad. Not everyone gets a moment of reflection before they die in a catastrophic accident. I was 18. I never had a girlfriend. I had not been to college or bought a car. I would never have a wife or children. All of these nevers coalesced into a solemn sadness as I stared at the window in front of me and pondered how many more seconds would pass before it imploded and killed me. But the window stayed intact. My father was peaceful as well. Maybe he was trying to figure out how he was going to explain this to Mom, but he said nothing more. After a few eternal minutes, a faint green line of light appeared at the top of the windows. More waves hit us, and now without power we were sideways to the sea and being blown down the pass, but green bubbles of hope began appearing and slowly the band of light grew. Realizing we were not dead after all, my father and I went to the engine room, drained water from the exhaust stacks and started the engines miraculously. There was no damage that could not be easily fixed, and soon we were again underway.